Hi, congratulations.
Thank you. It's so exciting.
It's gotta be, right? This is incredible. It just
it's
came
crazy.
Out yesterday, didn't it?
It came out yesterday, yeah. Today was the first big day.
So nuts.
Woo!
Doing a lot of tours, a lot of talks, all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
today was like Good Morning America and Today's Show. It's been a whirlwind.
How early do you have to get up for Good Morning America?
I had to wake up at 4:30 this morning. But it was fun. I watched the sunrise, got my makeup done. It was a good day.
You are so optimistic. Yeah, I watched the sunrise an hour and a half after I woke up, right? You got up at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it was pretty early, but I got a head start on the day. So
It's a great reason to have to get up, though.
Thank you. It really is. It was really fun.
Awesome. This is so incredible. You open the introduction of this of the book saying that if someone were to tell you 10 years ago that you were going to have all these things that you're working on now and have this book and be an author of a cookbook, you wouldn't believe it, right? So describe to me that moment when you saw it on the shelf, when it was real, like this is your book. It's a thing.
I know. I actually still haven't seen it on the shelf. I'm like, I want to go to like a Barnes & Noble and like actually, it kind of feels like it's not happening. So I worked as a model for a long time, for 12 years, and I never really intended to get into food. I launched a food blog literally as like my side hustle, thinking it was going to be something that I did occasionally. And within, so I launched it in July. Within 3 weeks, I had a book agent calling me. And within 3 months, I got headhunted by the head of Refinery 29 to head up their food and drink vertical. So my entire life literally flipped around within 90 days of my blog launching, which has just been wild, not unexpected.
That's pretty insane. So how long ago did you launch the blog exactly?
I launched it July of 2014.
Okay, so you've had it, and you've been so that answers my follow-up of how long you've been working on this book, right? Like, did you start not within 90 days?
Yeah, no, it took a while. I mean, like I was saying to somebody yesterday, I think from proposal, because you have to go through that whole book proposal to pub date, it's been 3 years. So it takes a long time to give birth to a book.
That's pretty
a very long time, yeah.
3 years, and I guess a lot of different revisions, a lot of different versions. You're trying out a lot of different recipes and stuff like that,
yes.
Right?
It's 100 recipes in the book, and so we probably tested about 125. 25 didn't make it because we just couldn't make them work. And then the 100 that we did get, we tested each one at least 2 to 3 times to make sure that they were really good. So we tested 300 times.
When you're testing, at the risk of like dumbing down the process, but is it essentially we're making it and tasting it and seeing if it's good or not? Like,
totally.
Do you have like a panel of trusted peers? Like, who are you testing?
No, my boyfriend is my guinea pig. Yes. And he's very honest with me, so that's good. And then if my mom was around, she would test too. And then we would just test it. And I honestly, I had about 3 weeks to really test these recipes because I was still working at Refinery, and I woke up every morning super early, 5:30. I'd meditate for half an hour, and then I'd write 8 recipes. And it would literally just be like a cup of this, tablespoon of that, and just kind of draft it out, kind of sensing what it should be. And then we'd test them and tweak them during the day. And I did that every single day for 3 weeks. And then we hammered out the book that way.
That's pretty incredible. When you're saying you write 8 recipes, do you like in the same way that, I write an email to somebody, like you just think of that would taste great together. Or like, where are you pulling your inspiration from? How are you writing these down? How are you sourcing all the recipes?
So some of them are like family recipes and friend recipes, but people, when they give you a recipe, they're always very casual about it. They're like, oh, a drab of this. And you can't be that casual in a cookbook. So those were really honing in on like the measurements. And then honestly, I have this, I don't know if I should admit this, but I'm going to anyway. There's this really great 2 books, maybe there are 3 now, but the 2 that I use, it's called the Flavor Bible. And the Flavor Bible is literally an A to Z of every single ingredient in the world. And you can look up any ingredient and then it lists every single thing that goes with that ingredient.
That is incredible.
So, and it's not specific. It's not like use a teaspoon. It's just like coconut. Here are the 50 things that'll work with coconut. And so I would open up that book and I'd know that I had to do 4 asparagus things that day. And I'd just be like, okay, how can I make these asparagus dishes taste hugely different from one to the other? And that Flavor Bible really helped me create a foundation for flavor profiles. Yeah. And then it was tweaking from there.
Is it literally just called the Flavor Bible?
The Flavor Bible.
It's like a rhyming dictionary for food.
It's like one of the best things I've ever found, and I think it should be in everybody's kitchen, whether you're a foodie or not, because it really does help you kind of riff and get a sense. And like some of the things are really surprising. You would never expect that vanilla would work with shrimp, for example.
No
you know,
way.
but they have really surprising things in there.
You do coconut shrimp, right? So I guess I could see the jump. I've never done vanilla shrimp, but I guess like a little dab.
It's a very interesting thing to play with.
So 100 recipes, you said 25 or 20 or so didn't make it. What were some that you knew right away, like, oh, this one's got to be in the book. This is one of my favorites. Or were there none that popped like that?
There's not on the cover, but my most favorite thing in this cookbook is a beet ricotta pasta. And I don't even really like beets, so it's not like I'm a beet gal, but we mixed it with really like whole milk ricotta and put in lemon zest and Parmigiano, and the way that it comes to, first of all, it makes the pasta this beautiful color, so it looks delicious right even before you eat it, and then when you eat it, it's just, the flavor combinations are so good, and I've cooked it for multiple dinner parties, and everybody always asks me to send them the recipe afterwards.
That was actually one of the ones, because I'm not a big fan of beets either. They always come off a little earthy, or maybe I'm just doing something wrong, but
This cuts the earthiness.
I saw this particular recipe, and I was like, yep, gonna try that one. That one looks
very
incredible.
good. It is.
Well, I gotta ask, I know your mother's side's Italian. I grew up in an Italian family. There's definitely a lot of recipes in here that you even say, like they come from, you know, my grandfather used to make this, and my family used to make that. Were there recipes that like defined your childhood that maybe you couldn't put in because they were either took too long or maybe weren't that healthy? Because I know an Italian family, like for Thanksgiving or Christmas, it's not about health at that point.
No, it's really not.
It's a different goal.
I think one dish, you know, like my last meal would be tortellini drowned in pesto with olive oil and like an incredible amount of Parmesan cheese. It's probably like the least healthy thing, but I love it. Whenever I have a bad day, that's what I eat to like get me through to the next day. And I have a lot of childhood memories with that. I actually wrote a food essay about it. My dad made it for me when I was a kid. I was a huge Beatles fan when I was a child. This cover is actually inspired by the Yellow Submarine, the Beatles cartoon, The Sea of Holes, and I wanted to call John Lennon one night after I watched The Yellow Submarine, and my dad had to explain to me that John Lennon had been assassinated and all this stuff, so I had this horrible day.
How old were you?
I was really little. I was like 6 or 7. And then he took me to Strawberry Fields, and we sang with people, and, you know, they have people always playing guitar there and stuff, and so that was like my first memory of having a day where I was just kind of really reconciling a bunch of big things that I didn't understand. And that night, my dad came home and made me tortellini with pesto.
Wow.
And ever since then, that's been my kind of go-to comfort food. So that didn't make it into the book, but that is one of my most favorite meals.
That is that's an incredible story to have behind a favorite meal. Like for some people, it's like, oh, I like pizza.
Yeah.
Like that's a story. That's amazing.
Thank
wow.
you.
So talking about all these incredible dishes and ingredients and stuff like that, one of the things you mentioned as well, big like farmer markets is a great resource, a great place to get all these ingredients. But you also touch on that they can be a little bit overwhelming at times.
Yes.
I'm wondering what some of your like farmers market navigational tips might be to help.
God, you know, I talk about this in the book. Like, I know I should be like going to shop at farmers markets every day, but I find it really overwhelming, especially the one on Union Square. I'm sorry to call it out, but it's just, it's so overwhelming. And I always feel like there's like 1,000 people there, and then like the Hare Krishna are always singing, and like people are trying to sell me haircuts.
Atmosphere.
And like, I just, you know, and so I love that place. And I really admire what they try to do, but I've kind of stopped going there.
Okay.
And now I just try to find smaller local markets. And I actually moved to Brooklyn, and I'm very lucky because in my neighborhood every Saturday there's a farmer's market that is way more mellow and smaller, and I can get everything I need. So
your advice would be move to Brooklyn.
My advice is move to Brooklyn. No, my advice is like there are a lot of great farmers markets all over the place. Maybe there are these big famous ones that everybody goes to, and they're wonderful. But if you want something a little bit easier, there might be one nearby that's just as good, but maybe doesn't get the same amount of like buzz, you know?
Is there a tip for somebody that can't make it necessarily to a farmer's market? Things that they can still find that are still sort of environmentally conscious or still responsible or still great ingredients, they just might not necessarily be at a farmer's market, like things to look for?
Totally. I think a lot of stores now are getting better about labeling their sourcing. And I really like, if I can't find something that's local and organic, I really like buying like hydroponic foods. Like Gotham Greens has like it's an incredible hydroponic farm here in New York City. There's like no pesticides and carbon footprint is basically zero. So I try to go for things like that. And then just generally my kind of grocery hack for the week is I do half of my grocery shopping in the prepared section food aisle. So I get half of it, so it's already done for me. And then I go do the other half at a farmer's market.
That's actually really good too.
And it kind of like, it kind of cuts my cooking time in half, but I can still kind of have the best of both worlds and participate in both.
That's an awesome tip. No, but that's one of the things that I do love about this book is that I think you're speaking to sort of a universal problem that a lot of us are facing, which is like, it's super cheap and super easy to get bad food all the time everywhere. That's always an option. So I think a lot more people are trying to turn to something that they can feel better about and make their bodies feel better, but it's like impossible to do and it takes so much time. We all get tired when we get home. And there's so many great tips in here. What do you think about like the rise of like these subscription meal services, like Plated and all those sort of things, and Fresh to Go and all these different things? Have you tried any of those before?
I have. I've tried Blue Apron with a friend of mine. Listen, I love those services. I think that anything that gets people feeling more confident in the kitchen is a great thing.
Yeah.
My only issue with them is like, I feel whenever I used to get them, there was so much waste, you know, and that's not really their fault because, you know, they have to package it in a certain way because I'm sure it's like a government regulation and there's no alternative to plastic. So I'm not putting it on them, but that was always one thing that just really got under my, you know, because kind of affected me. So I just tried, like I said, to do half prepared food section aisle, half grocery store, and try to hack it that way.
Yeah, you're right. That is probably the major downside because I tried out one of them and it's incredible. It really is. It's super convenient. But yeah, you can't help but feel as you're opening your 14th plastic storage bag, oh Jesus, like what's the trade-off here,
and just,
right? Like,
you know, plastic in general, I feel like is just like taken over everyone's life. Like I compost in my neighborhood now. They just brought the composting, and like I literally don't take out my garbage anymore, like except for like once a week. Compost is, you know, every couple days. The recycling, the amount of plastic I put in there every day because there's no other, is just like, it's astounding. And I don't even drink like bottled water and stuff. It's just stuff that I'm like consuming because it's just there and you have to do it, you know, so it's a problem.
For sure. There's a great thing in your book. You talk early on about the 3 core reasons that you're doing this. And one of them is in a time where people are cooking less at home, you want to sort of encourage that and bring that back. Why do you think people are cooking less? And then also, why is it so important to get us to cook at home again? Why do you think it is?
I think people are cooking less because everyone's overwhelmed. Like, I'm really overwhelmed. I mean, you know, when I was writing this book, I was also doing Impatient Foodie and I had an office job, and like cooking at home was the last thing I wanted to do. But I think it's important for people to maintain a connection with where their food comes from and their food supply, because choices around food really do affect a lot of way bigger issues that I think a lot of us in this room are concerned about, whether it's like ocean acidification or human rights working or animal rights. There's so many things that food affects and touches on. And if people just stop that connection, then these problems could just run rampant. And I feel like the locavore movement and the organic movement, though they're not perfect, they have kind of brought a certain consciousness back into the conversation. And that's it's a consciousness and a conversation that I think really needs to be preserved and evolved, you know, because like, you know, having the bon appetit locavore lifestyle 24/7 is not possible for almost everybody, but it's something that I think is very precious.
Well, I really love sort of the tone you've struck within the book, because it is like an encouraging tone without being sort of overwhelming and without also making you feel guilty for all this stuff. You're like, look, I've made the mistakes. I've done these things
every
too.
day.
We're all human. But like that notwithstanding, there's little things that we can do to make this better. I loved one of the titles, just to go back to the tone, was like Useless Spice Chicken or something.
Yes, Useless Spice Chicken.
What is the useless spice?
So a celebrity cookbook, which shall remain nameless, told me that if I bought this spice, so I have 64 spices in my pantry, and I have no idea why, because I really only use cinnamon for like hot chocolate and oatmeal. And I have no idea where any of these other spices have come from. I'm pretty sure they've come from other cookbooks which have told me these are the things you have to have, and then I never used them.
64 is a really precise number. I appreciate that.
I counted them
I was gonna
because
say,
I wrote an article about it, and I was like, damn it, 64. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And this one particular spice is called I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's like 5 spice Chinese blend or something like that. And I think if you're very good at cooking Chinese food, which I'm not at all, it's probably great. But for somebody growing up from an Italian family, it's the opposite of my palate. Sorry, it has fennel seeds, licorice, cinnamon, and like 2 other things that I was like, what am I gonna make with this? And then I think that the cookbook told me to buy it, and I cook from this cookbook all the time. It's fantastic, but I have yet to find a single recipe in there where they use it. So I just had this useless spice, and as I was going through my morning meditation around my this is like the interesting thing about meditation, like little kind of like whispers come to you. And as I was meditating one morning, it was like, look in your spice rack. And I was like, okay. And I, got out of my meditation and just went, and it was sitting there, and I was like, oh, I wonder if like a bunch of people made this mistake, of like buying something that they don't know how to use, but you can make something delicious out of it. So.
Well, also, I love sort of a kindred spirit of that is the pasta dish from your grandfather. Where it's like you have
it's
all
right
these,
there.
Yeah. Oh, it looks so good. I'm excited. I'm going to try that one
Yay,
out.
thank you.
Definitely. I'm trying all the pasta ones.
Yeah,
obviously.
good. I'm a carb fanatic
Yeah,
myself.
but it's just like, you have all these extra herbs left over. Chop them up and throw them into this pasta. It's going to be really tasty.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, I just saw you did, I think like a month or so ago, a video series, or first, I believe in a series, Food Futures. Right?
Yes.
That was super cool. Tell us a
Did
little
it?
bit about that.
Oh, thank you.
And where the idea came from, and if there's some more to look forward to.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I went to grad school at the London School of Economics, and I ended up I got my master's degree in biomedicine, but I also took classes in environmental politics, and then I took a cultural theory class because somebody told me it was cool. Literally, like, no strategy. I was just like, sure. And then at the LSE, in order to graduate, you have to write a dissertation that touches on every single class that you took. So it took me like 3 months where I was literally like, public health, environmental politics, and culture. Like, what am I going to write about? And then one morning over oatmeal, my brain was like, you could write about food because it connects, all that stuff. So that's kind of how I stumbled into food by accident. And I ended up writing my dissertation on the future of feeding urban populations in light of climate change, with a particular focus on this technology called, it was a proposal at the time, called vertical farming. And vertical farming is basically this proposal wherein farms come back into the center of cities in these massive hydroponic skyscraper farms. You have to use 95% less water. The food supply is completely controlled, no pesticides. And then the flip side of that is that the farmland that's out in traditional farms then goes back to nature. So you pay farmers to grow trees to sequester carbon. It's kind of like a whole climate change mitigation strategy. So at the time, this was a proposal that when I called VCs and asked them, would you ever fund this? They said, absolutely not. It's never going to work. It's never going to be fundable. 7 years later, there are 8 of them in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so I called up Food Republic and 0.0, which is Anthony Bourdain's production company. And I said, look, I think that this is like a turning point in food. And I think there's a lot of technology happening now around food that's really changing the conversation, and nobody's really talking about it. So let's make a series about all these things and really kind of inform people about what's going on, but also, vertical farms are an interesting solution, but they create other problems. So also kind of engaging people on like, what kind of food future do we want to have as a society? Because, my personal opinion is that technologies are not at all deterministic. They're very much instruments of the cultures that they come from. So we have an opportunity to shape these things in a certain way through legislation, through public opinion. So let's get involved and really know what these things are proposing so we can participate.
For sure. No, I think, and it couldn't come at a better time to sort of raise awareness and kind of get this conversation going. I was just fascinated by the whole thing, the process in general, the fact they're not even grown on soil. There was like a piece of fabric that
it looks like a fleece blanket.
Yeah, I thought it was like a blanket.
Crazy.
And then, like, it's just growing all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating. It must have been surreal to be standing in the middle of this thing that 7 years ago you heard would never exist.
I cried.
Yeah.
I did. I got a little teary in the bathroom because it was something that as I was researching, I thought it was such a tremendous proposal. And I just to be sitting in the middle of this technology that I know is going to change the way that we all eat food and source our food. And the beginning of it's really in its infant stages, just felt so hopeful. It felt like a new pioneering stage in the world.
Very, very exciting thing, and a really
Thank
cool video.
you.
And so, yeah, I found that one. There's more to come, right? You're working on.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're working on others. Absolutely.
Very exciting. We're going to go to audience in just a second, but I wanted to ask you one more question. You've done and continue to do so many different things. As you mentioned, you're a model, you're at Refinery, you have your food blog, you have a book now, you're doing this video series. Is there a skill set or something about yourself that you find you bring with you to each of those projects that applies to all of these different things? Or maybe a talent you discovered along the way or something?
I don't know if it's a talent, honestly, but I'm never embarrassed to stay when I don't understand or I don't know something.
Yeah.
And I find that that's something that people feel very embarrassed to admit, and I'll literally be the first one to be like, I don't get it, explain again. And I think that when I was in kindergarten, remember when they were teaching you how to like raise your hand, and the teacher would say, if you have a question, chances are somebody else in the class has it too, so ask. I really took that advice to heart, and I've really used it in my adult life, and I find that people really relate to it. I think people appreciate it, and I appreciate it because it takes pressure off me because I don't have to be perfect or like a guru. You know, I'm just kind of like trying to live my life and figure it out, and it takes the pressure off me, and I think it makes the tone more friendly.
For sure, and I think that's the thing. I think I spoke to it earlier, and I'll say it again. The perspective, like your point of view, your tone, is what makes this book great. It makes it fun to read, and it also, I'm telling you guys, this is a very valuable book. They're very easy, very quick recipes, 30 minutes or less, lifesavers. We're going to turn it over. We got some mics in the room. I think our first question is right here in the front.
Hi.
Oh, it's back there.
How are you?
Good, thanks. But I have to confess, I'm a total fake foodie. Like, I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and I ordered smoked paprika, and I was like, we have to have this in the house.
I need it now.
Now we've
I don't
never
know why.
used it. And other than the same 4 meals that we make every week, like, I don't know. I go to the grocery store, and I'm so overwhelmed. So I'm wondering if you have, like, a strategy for how to incorporate new things into our weekly routine.
Ooh, that's a good one. So I will say that I have a staple grocery list too, and I definitely have 4 or 5 things that I cook on rotation too, so I think that you're not alone. I think it's nice to cook things that you're comfortable with. So my staple grocery list is like a pre-roasted chicken from the grocery store, and then like a few salads. Like they often have a quinoa salad or a farro salad, and I'll get that. And then at my local store, they have a little local farmer's market section, so I don't even really have to go to the farmer's market if it's not open or whatever. And whatever's there, I grab what's there, and then I create a chopped chicken salad with the new vegetables, or I look up, how to create like an heirloom tomato, because that's what's kind of starting to pop up now, salad or, sauce. So I think not feeling like, if you can integrate it 10%, it'll slowly start taking over more, but really kind of integrating it in with things that you know already is going to be hugely helpful. I hope that helps.
Awesome. Our next question right here.
Hi.
Hi. So summer's coming, clearly, and it's getting hot. And oftentimes we're in the kitchen, we don't want to cook when it's really hot. Do you have like a nice, cold, refreshing go-to recipe?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I love making, the one thing that I love to make in the summertime, especially when it gets brutally hot in New York City and humid, is like gazpacho, which is a cold tomato soup. So good. The one in my cookbook, Impatient Foodie cookbook, is a radish-based one. So it's still got the herbs and the tomatoes, but it's got this like beautiful, sharp radish flavor that I find really refreshing in the summertime. And then I also have a great, they just showed it on Good Morning America. It's a really great dessert where you don't bake and you don't cook. You just buy things at the supermarket and assemble, and it takes literally 3 minutes. Yeah. And it's whipped cream, a crazy amount of ice cream, meringues that you just crumble and crunch over, and then you buy the fresh berries that you can find at your farmer's market, whatever is in season, whether it's fall or summer, drown it in chocolate sauce. You got yourself a great, quick dessert.
That sound really good.
Thank you.
Were there any, like for me, I know like fall is defined by like my grandfather's lasagna, and like summer, my mom has a macaroni salad. Like I know summer's here. Were there dishes growing up that like defined seasons for you? Like, oh, it's this time of year, I get to have this.
I think that my grandfather's herb pasta, which my grandfather, by the way, made because he hated doing the dishes. That was his inspiration for making that. So, that goes way back. And I really like that recipe because it's all the summer herbs that, when you go to the farmer's market and you need like 5 basil leaves, but you end up getting like 5 tons of basil leaves because, and I end up having all these herbs that are dying in my fridge and I feel horrible. So this pasta, basically you chop them all up and throw them in with pasta. And it's such a nice way to kind of eat the summer, and it's one pot. So, easy to clean up. And then I'm thinking for winter, like things like roast chickens and stuff like that. That was really like stews. Those were the easy things, cozy foods for winter time.
Winter day is like, that's where you want to be. I think we have time for one more question, and it is right there.
Hi. So I'm someone who's like really impatient and lazy, and like I don't want to cook for myself or anything like that. What's like one recipe in your book that I can use instead of like throwing in pizza in the oven?
And throwing a pizza in the oven? Well, if you like pizza, it's not in my cookbook, but it's on my website. I have a 2-ingredient pizza dough, and you can make your own pizza with literally anything you can find in the market, and that is self-rising flour and Greek yogurt, and you mix it together and push it into a pan and top it with whatever. I swear to God, it is the best pizza dough. It takes like 7 minutes to make, and then you just put it in the oven, and I was going to say like 15 minutes to make it golden brown and melt whatever's on top of it. you could go to a store and get the pizza or order it. It's going to take you less time to cook this pizza.
That's insane. I never thought of that. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I gotta let
well,
you go.
thank you,
But
everybody.
before we do, of course, impatientfoodie.com, right?
Yes,
That's the blog.
impatientfoodie.com.
The new book is out yesterday, so you can find it everywhere, guys. And keep an eye out for Food Futures, more episodes.
Yes,
That's going to be
please.
wonderful. One
Thank
more
you so
time.
much.
Make some noise for Elettra, everybody. Come on.
Thank you so much.